Aboard a private Gulfstream jet soaring 30,000 feet above the earth, a pregnant woman's world shattered. She wasn't just betrayed by her husband, she was humiliated by his mistress in the most brutal way imaginable. With a fistful of her hair, the other woman tried to tear her dignity away, all while her husband stood by and watched. But they made one catastrophic mistake. They forgot who her family was. They attacked the sister-in-law of Aidan Hawthorne, a man who doesn't just own companies, he crushes empires. They thought they were untouchable in the sky, but they were about to learn that his revenge has no altitude limit. Lauren Hawthorne believed her life was a fairy tale, albeit one written in the hushed, expensive ink of old money. Her husband Graham was the charming younger son of the Hawthorne dynasty, a family whose name was synonymous with global logistics and unfathomable wealth. Their penthouse apartment overlooked the city, a glass castle where the lights below twinkled like a fallen constellation just for them. At 7 months pregnant, Lauren felt a profound sense of contentment. She spent her days designing the nursery, picking out soft, neutral colors and dreaming of the tiny fingers that would soon curl around hers. Graham had been different lately. More distant. He attributed it to the stress of a new acquisition his older brother Aidan was spearheading. "Aidan's putting the screws to everyone, darling," he'd said, with a dismissive wave of his hand, his eyes glued to the glowing screen of his phone. "You know how he gets. A titan of industry doesn't have an off switch." Lauren accepted this as she always did. Graham was the creative one, the vice president of marketing, while Aidan was the formidable CEO, the true architect of their fortune. Aidan was sharp, intense, and possessed a quiet authority that could silence a boardroom with a single glance. Graham, by contrast, was all charm and easy smiles. The idea for the trip to St. Bart's had been Graham's. "Just a final getaway for us, Lauren," he'd cooed, kissing her temple. "Before the baby arrives and our world turns upside down, we'll take the company jet. No stress, just sun and sand." Lauren was thrilled. The distance she'd felt from him seemed to melt away with the promise of the vacation. She imagined them walking on the beach, his hand resting on her swollen belly, reconnecting before their lives changed forever. She packed with joyful anticipation, folding soft linen dresses and choosing a new swimsuit that accommodated her changing body. But small, sharp moments of unease kept pricking at her bubble of happiness. The night before they were due to leave, Graham's phone buzzed late. He snatched it from the bedside table with a speed that felt jarring. Lauren, half asleep, saw him walk out to the balcony, his back to her, as he spoke in low, urgent tones. When he came back inside, he looked startled to find her awake. "Everything okay, honey?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. "Just work." He lied, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Aidan needs a report finalized before we're wheels up. Don't worry about it." He slipped back into bed, but his body was a stiff, cold line next to her warmth. The next morning at the private airfield, the unease returned. The flight attendant, a woman named Patricia, whom Lauren knew from previous trips, greeted them warmly. "Mrs. Hawthorne, you're glowing. Mr. Hawthorne, all set for your departure." "Almost, Patricia," Graham said, checking his watch. "We're just waiting for one more passenger." Lauren frowned. "One more? I thought this was our trip, Graham." He avoided her gaze, fiddling with the cuff of his expensive shirt. "It's a colleague, a last-minute thing. She's overseeing the launch of a new resort campaign, and Aidan insisted she join us to get the luxury perspective." "It's work, Lauren, that's all. It won't interfere with our time." The excuse was plausible, just plausible enough to be insulting. Aidan was a pragmatist. He would never approve such a frivolous expense. Before Lauren could press him further, a sleek black car pulled up beside the jet, The door opened, and a woman emerged. She was the kind of woman who seemed to defy gravity. Tall, impossibly slender, in a white designer jumpsuit, with sunglasses so large they hid half her face. Her crimson lipstick was a slash of defiance against her flawless skin. She walked with a languid confidence that bordered on arrogance. Lauren felt an instant cold knot tighten in her stomach. This was not a colleague. This was a threat. The woman glided up the steps, her eyes now visible, as she removed her sunglasses, scanning Lauren from head to toe. There was a flicker of something derision, perhaps, as her gaze lingered on Lauren's pregnant belly. "Graham, darling." The woman purred, her voice a low, smoky drawl. She ignored Lauren completely and kissed Graham on the cheek, a gesture far too intimate for a mere colleague. Graham cleared his throat, a faint blush creeping up his neck. "Lauren, this is Bianca Reed. She's our top consultant on the new branding initiative. Bianca, this is my wife, Lauren." Bianca finally turned her attention to Lauren, her smile a beautiful predatory thing. "A pleasure," she said, though her tone suggested it was anything but. "I've heard so much about you." The three of them stood in the plush cabin of the Gulf Stream G650, the silence thick with unspoken words. Lauren looked at her husband, searching his face for an explanation, for a sign that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But all she found was guilt and cowardice. The gilded cage had just shrunk, and she was trapped inside with the two people who were about to set it on fire. The jet doors closed with a final sealing hiss, and Lauren knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that her fairy tale was over. The ascent was smooth, a quiet, powerful climb into the endless blue. But inside the cabin, a storm was brewing. The space, normally a symbol of expansive luxury, with its cream leather seats and polished mahogany, felt suffocating. Lauren sat across from Graham and Bianca, her hands resting protectively on her belly, a silent testament to the life she carried and the family they were supposed to be. Bianca, however, acted as if Lauren was nothing more than a piece of furniture. She had taken the seat next to Graham, her knee casually brushing against his. She laughed a loud, theatrical sound that grated on Lauren's nerves at something Graham whispered, placing a manicured hand on his arm. Graham, for his part, seemed caught in a state of paralysis, offering weak, strained smiles in Lauren's direction, as if to say, "Just play along." Lauren wouldn't. She refused to be a silent, complicit observer of her own humiliation. "So, Bianca," Lauren began, her voice steady and clear, cutting through their private chatter. "Graham tells me you're a consultant. Which firm are you with?" It was a simple question, a test. Bianca was momentarily thrown, her practiced smile tightening. "I'm independent," she said vaguely, waving a dismissive hand. "I work with exclusive clients. The Hawthorne brand is looking to appeal to a younger, more vibrant demographic." The implication was clear. Lauren, pregnant and serene, was the old, tired demographic. "I see," Lauren said, her gaze unwavering. "And this required you to join our private vacation. I wasn't aware the marketing budget extended to last-minute trips to St. Bart's." Graham jumped in his voice, placating. "Lauren, please. It was Aidan's call. You know how he is all about synergy and immersion." He was using his brother's name like a shield, a tactic Lauren now saw as utterly pathetic. "I know Aidan very well, Graham," Lauren replied, her voice dropping an octave. "And I know he values efficiency and discretion. This is neither." The air crackled. Bianca shot Graham a look, a flash of irritation that said, "Control your wife." She then turned her full attention back to Lauren, her expression shifting from false pleasantry to open condescension. "You must understand," Bianca said, leaning forward as if sharing a secret. In our world, the lines between work and pleasure often blur. Graham is a visionary, and to get the best out of him, one has to provide the right stimulus. She let the word hang in the air, thick with insinuation. Every word was a carefully aimed dart. The flight attendant, Patricia, appeared her face, a mask of professional neutrality, though her eyes betrayed her discomfort. "Can I get anyone a drink? Champagne, perhaps?" "I'll have a glass," Bianca said immediately, her eyes locking with Lauren's. "We have so much to celebrate, don't we, Graham?" "I don't think so," Lauren said, standing up. The sudden movement was clumsy, her belly making it awkward. She needed space air a moment away from the poisonous atmosphere. "Graham, may I have a word with you in private?" She moved toward the small galley area at the back of the jet. Graham followed his face, pale. "Lauren, don't make a scene," he hissed, grabbing her arm. "Don't make a scene," she whispered back, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. "You bring your mistress on our family vacation on a jet paid for by your brother, while I am carrying your child, and you're worried about a scene. She's not," he started, but the lie died on his lips. He couldn't even look at her. "It's complicated. It seems quite simple to me," Lauren shot back. "You're a coward and a cheat. What I don't understand is why you would do this to us right now." From the main cabin, Bianca's voice called out, sharp and impatient. "Is everything all right, darling? Your wife seems a little emotional. Must be the hormones." That was it. The final shred of Lauren's composure snapped. She turned and walked back into the cabin, her eyes blazing. She stood before Bianca, who remained seated, looking up at her with a smirk. "You will not speak about me," Lauren said, her voice dangerously low. "You are a guest here, an uninvited one, and you will show some respect." Bianca laughed, a cold, ugly sound. "Respect, darling, you have it all wrong. I'm not the guest. I'm the upgrade." The cruelty of the statement stole Lauren's breath. She looked at Graham, who stood frozen by the galley, a statue of indecision. His silence was his answer. He was choosing this woman over his pregnant wife. The turbulence wasn't in the air around them. It was right here in the cabin, tearing her life apart. And the worst of it was yet to come. The smirk on Bianca's face was the final provocation. It was the look of a victor, a woman who believed she had already won, that Lauren was an obstacle already cleared from her path. For Lauren, it wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the brazen, soul-crushing disrespect. "Get off this plane," Lauren said, her voice shaking but resolute. She knew it was an impossible command mid-flight, but the words needed to be said. "You are not welcome here." Bianca's smirk widened. She slowly, theatrically took a sip of her champagne. "I don't think I'll be going anywhere. Graham needs me. Don't you, baby?" She didn't even look at him, her eyes still locked on Lauren, enjoying the slow, torturous unraveling of a marriage. Graham remained silent, his inaction a deafening roar in the pressurized cabin. He was a spectator at the demolition of his own life. "He is my husband," Lauren stated the words, tasting like ash in her mouth. "And I am carrying his son. This charade, whatever it is, ends now." Bianca placed her champagne flute down with a deliberate sharp click. She rose from her seat, a predator uncoiling. She was taller than Lauren, especially in her heels, and she used her height to loom, to intimidate. "You're still not getting it," Bianca said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "The baby doesn't secure your position. It just makes you baggage, an anchor. Men like Graham don't want anchors. They want speedboats. And I," she gestured to herself, "am the latest model." The callousness of the words, the utter disregard for the new life Lauren was nurturing, sent a shock wave of cold fury through her. "You are a disgusting human being," Lauren breathed. And then it happened. In a flash of movement so quick it was surreal, Bianca's hand shot out. She didn't slap her. She didn't push her. She did something far more primal, more humiliating. She tangled her fingers deep into Lauren's hair, yanking her head forward with a brutal tug. Pain exploded on Lauren's scalp, a sharp, searing shock that brought tears to her eyes. She cried out, stumbling forward, her hands flying instinctively to her belly to shield her child. The world tilted the luxurious cabin, blurring into a nightmare of cream leather and blinding sunlight. "You listen to me, you pathetic little housewife," Bianca snarled, her face inches from Lauren's, her knuckles tight in her hair. "Your reign is over. I'm the one he's taking to St. Bart's. I'm the one he'll be waking up to. So you can either sit down, shut up, and accept it, or I can make the rest of this flight even more unpleasant for you." Time seemed to freeze. Lauren could hear the hum of the engines, the frantic beating of her own heart. She looked past Bianca's hate-filled face to her husband. Graham. He was standing there, his mouth slightly agape, his eyes wide with a look of stunned horror. But he didn't move. He didn't rush to defend her. He didn't shout at Bianca to let her go. He just watched. Finally, as if waking from a trance, he took a hesitant step forward. "Bianca, that's enough," he said, his voice weak, utterly devoid of authority. "Stay out of this, Graham," Bianca snapped without looking at him. It was then that Patricia, the flight attendant, rushed forward. "Ma'am, you cannot do that. Please unhand her immediately." Bianca, seeing the crew member approach, finally released her grip with a contemptuous shove. Lauren staggered back, catching her balance on a nearby seat. Her scalp throbbed. Her eyes were swimming with tears of pain and humiliation, but a new cold clarity was settling in her heart. She looked at her husband one last time. He finally moved toward her, his hands outstretched. "Lauren, I'm sorry. She went too far, too far." Lauren's voice was a dead whisper. She looked at his hands, then at his face, and saw him not as her husband, but as a stranger, a weak and feckless man who had stood by while the mother of his child was assaulted. "Don't you dare touch me," she said, the words like chips of ice. She turned away from him and walked to the furthest empty seat at the front of the cabin, sinking into it. She ignored the frantic whispers between Graham and Bianca. She ignored Patricia's concerned inquiries. She simply stared out the window at the clouds, vast and white and indifferent. She was trapped at 30,000 feet, but in her mind she was already gone. She knew exactly who she was going to call the moment the wheels touched the ground. Not the police, not her lawyer. She was going to call Aidan, and she knew he would bring hell down with him. The descent into St. Bart's was a silent, agonizing affair. Lauren stared blankly out the window, tracing the patterns of the turquoise water as it met the white sand beaches. The beauty of the island was a bitter irony, a paradise that served as the backdrop for her personal hell. Graham and Bianca remained in the back of the cabin, their hushed, tense conversation a constant, irritating hum. They didn't approach her again. Fear, or perhaps a sliver of shame from Graham, kept them at a distance. The moment the jet's wheels hit the tarmac with a gentle bump, Lauren felt a surge of purpose. The cabin door opened, and the warm, humid Caribbean air flooded in. A black SUV was waiting to transport them to the resort. Graham finally approached her. "Lauren, we need to talk. Let's just get to the hotel and—" "There is no we." Lauren cut him off, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. She stood and walked past him, down the stairs and onto the tarmac, not giving him a second glance. A member of the ground crew gestured toward the waiting car. "I need a separate car," Lauren said firmly. The crew member looked confused, glancing toward Graham for confirmation. "She'll ride with us," Graham insisted, hurrying down the steps behind her. Bianca followed, sunglasses back on a mask of bored indifference. Lauren turned to face her husband. "If you try to force me into that car, I will start screaming right here on this tarmac. I will tell them that your companion assaulted a pregnant woman on your brother's jet, and you did nothing." "Do you want to see how that plays out?" Graham's face went white. He knew she meant it. Defeated, he muttered to the crew, "Get her another car. Take her to the villa first." The ride was a blur. Lauren sat in the cool, leather interior of a separate SUV, her mind a maelstrom. She didn't cry. The pain had crystallized into a hard, cold resolve. At the sprawling private villa that Aiden's company kept on the island, she dismissed the staff, walked straight into the master suite, and locked the door. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were trembling slightly, but her purpose was clear. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the name Aiden. He answered on the second ring, his voice crisp and professional. "Lauren, I assume you landed safely. Is Graham with you?" That was all it took. The sound of his calm, steady voice, the mention of his brother's name, it broke the dam. A single choked sob escaped her lips. The tone on the other end of the line shifted instantly. The polished CEO vanished, replaced by the concerned brother-in-law. "Lauren, what is it? What's wrong? Are you okay? Is it the baby? The baby's fine," she managed to say, her voice cracking. "Aiden, something terrible happened. Talk to me," he said, his voice a low, commanding comfort. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." And she did. The words poured out of her, a torrent of betrayal, humiliation, and fear. She told him about Bianca, about Graham's lies about the scene on the jet. When she got to the part where Bianca pulled her hair, her voice broke completely. She described the physical pain, but more than that, the soul-deep agony of seeing her husband stand there and do nothing to protect her, to protect their child. She described his pathetic, weak apology. On the other end of the line, there was a profound, chilling silence. It wasn't the silence of someone who didn't know what to say. It was the silence of a predator focusing on its prey. When Aiden finally spoke, his voice was dangerously soft, a tone Lauren had only heard him use once before, when a rival company had tried to steal one of his patents. It was the sound of controlled, calculated rage. "Where is my brother right now, Lauren?" "He's on his way here, with her," she whispered. "Good, stay in your room. Lock the door. Do not speak to him. Do not engage with either of them. Are you listening to me, Lauren?" "Yes." "I am booking you a flight home. It will be on a commercial airline first class. I don't want you on that jet with them. A car will be at your villa in 2 hours to take you to the main airport. The tickets will be at the counter under your maiden name, Petrova. I'm sending my personal head of security, a man named Mr. Webb, to meet you at the airport in New York. He will take you to a safe place." The efficiency, the immediate plan of action, was a balm to her shattered nerves. He wasn't just offering sympathy, he was offering a lifeline. "Aiden, what are you going to do?" she asked, a small, fearful part of her needing to know. There was another pause, longer this time. "My brother made a choice today," Aiden said, his voice as cold and hard as granite. "He chose to dishonor his wife, his child, and the family name. He chose to align himself with trash, and choices have consequences. I am going to teach him and his companion what it means to cross a hawthorn." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The promise of retribution was absolute. "They will learn, Lauren," He finished, his voice a blade of ice. "I promise you that. They will regret ever getting on that plane." After the call ended, Lauren sank onto the bed. For the first time in hours, she felt a flicker of something other than pain. It was a cold, grim sense of certainty. The storm was no longer hers to weather alone. Aidan had taken the helm, and he was steering them straight into a hurricane of his own making. Aidan Hawthorne did not get angry. He got strategic. Rage was a blunt instrument, imprecise and messy. What he felt was a cold, focused fury, an energy he immediately channeled into dismantling his brother's life with surgical precision. The moment he ended the call with Lauren, he swiveled in his leather chair in his 80th floor Manhattan office, the city skyline a glittering backdrop to the destruction he was about to unleash. His first call was to his chief legal counsel. "David, I need you to draft documents for the immediate termination of Graham Hawthorne's employment from all Hawthorne Global subsidiaries. Clause 37B of his contract conduct, detrimental to the company's reputation. And I want to explore revoking his seat on the family trust. Find me a way." His second call was to the chief financial officer. "Martin, as of this moment, Graham Hawthorne's access to all corporate and family accounts is to be frozen. Cancel his corporate Amex Black card, his Visa, everything. Revoke his signing privileges. I want him cut off completely. If he tries to buy a pack of gum with company money, I want it declined." The third call was to the head of his family's security division, a formidable ex-MI6 agent named Robert Webb. "Webb, get to JFK. Lauren Hawthorne is arriving on a flight from St. Bart's. Her tickets are under Petrova. She is to be considered a Tier 1 protected principal. Take her to the Greenwich estate, not the city penthouse. Ensure the staff there is prepared for her, and that her privacy is absolute. No one gets to her, especially not Graham." His final call was to the head of operations for their private aviation fleet. "Michael, I need the flight logs and internal cabin recordings for Gulfstream N911HH for today's flight. A serious incident occurred on board involving a non-employee assaulting a family member. I also want a full background check on a passenger named Bianca Reed. I want to know everything, where she gets her money, who her associates are, every skeleton in her closet. I want it yesterday." With the foundational pieces in motion, Aidan leaned back in his chair. This was just the beginning. Graham's entire life was a construct, a house of cards built with Aidan's money on Aidan's land, under the protection of Aidan's name. And Aidan was about to blow it all down. Graham had always been the charming, handsome younger brother. He'd coasted through life on his name and a smile, taking a high-paying, low-responsibility job at the company Aidan had built from the ground up. He drove company cars, lived in a company-owned apartment, and funded his lavish lifestyle with a trust that Aidan administered. He thought his position was his birthright. He was about to learn it was a privilege, and privileges could be revoked. An hour later, the first reports started trickling in. The background check on Bianca Reed was particularly illuminating. She wasn't a consultant. She was a grifter who targeted wealthy, weak-willed men. She had a string of broken engagements and lawsuits settled out of court. Her income was a patchwork of gifts from her admirers. She wasn't just a mistress. She was a professional parasite. The report included photos of her with other men's social media posts, flaunting expensive gifts and whispers of connections to some very shady characters. Aidan saved the file. It would be his trump card. The true masterstroke came to him as he reviewed the aviation report. An assault on an aircraft, especially a private one, was a grey area, but if it was reported correctly, it fell under the jurisdiction of the Federal Aviation Administration. Intimidation or assault of a passenger was a federal offense. Aidan made one more call this time to a contact in Washington, D.C. He didn't make threats or demands. He simply stated the facts in a calm, measured tone. An incident occurred on one of my aircraft. A pregnant passenger was physically assaulted by another passenger. I have video evidence from the cabin surveillance. I feel it is my duty to report this potential violation of federal aviation regulations. He knew exactly what would happen. An investigation would be launched. Bianca Reed would be placed on a watch list. It would be a bureaucratic nightmare that would follow her for the rest of her life. As the sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows across his office, Aidan felt no satisfaction, only a grim sense of duty. He was purging a poison from his family. He had given Graham everything: a life of unimaginable luxury, a position of status, and a wonderful, loving wife. Graham had taken all of it for granted, and in one afternoon of supreme weakness and cruelty had thrown it all away. Aidan looked at a photo on his desk. It was from his wedding day, with him, his wife Graham, and a beaming Lauren. They looked so happy, so full of promise. A cold resolve hardened within him. He wasn't just doing this for Lauren. He was doing it to protect the future of their family, starting with the unborn child who deserved a better father than Graham had proven to be. The architect of ruin had laid his foundations. Now he would simply sit back and watch it all collapse. The sprawling beachfront villa was, for a fleeting moment, their victory prize. As they stepped into the open-air living room, a warm breeze drifted in from the terrace, carrying the scent of salt and hibiscus. An infinity pool seemed to melt seamlessly into the turquoise Caribbean Sea beyond. To Graham and Bianca, it was paradise found a kingdom they had just conquered. They found Lauren's luggage gone from the foyer, a single suitcase left behind. Graham nudged it with his foot. "Looks like she packed in a hurry," he said with a nervous chuckle, desperate to frame Lauren's flight as a fit of pique rather than a calculated retreat. "Good," Bianca declared, kicking off her heels and gliding across the cool limestone floor. Less baggage to deal with. She found the villa's impressively stocked wine cellar and emerged with a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon. "A toast," she said, filling 2 flutes, to new beginnings, and to getting what we want. Graham's unease was a low thrum beneath the surface, but he pushed it down, seduced by the fantasy she presented. They clinked glasses, the sound echoing in the cavernous room. They were Adam and Eve in a stolen Eden, oblivious to the serpent that was already coiled at the gate. For a few hours they lived the dream. They swam in the pool, drank champagne, and planned a lavish dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant on the coast. Bianca talked about redecorating the penthouse, about wintering in St. Bart's, about the life that was now rightfully hers. The first crack in their perfect world was almost imperceptible. Graham called to confirm their 9 p.m. dinner reservation. The maître d' was apologetic. "Monsieur Hawthorne, my apologies, but the credit card provided for the reservation deposit has been declined. Would you like to provide another?" Graham froze the flute halfway to his lips. "Declined? That's ridiculous. It's a Hawthorne Global Corporate card. There's no limit. Run it again." "We have, sir." 3 times. The voice on the phone replied, polite but firm. A cold sweat broke out on Graham's neck. He rattled off the number of his personal black card. "Try this one." He held his breath for a long 30 seconds, feigning nonchalance for Bianca's benefit. The voice returned. "I am terribly sorry, sir. That card has also been declined." Bianca, who had been listening, set her glass down. The playful mood vanished. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Graham said too quickly, forcing a laugh. "Just some international banking glitch. Happens all the time. I'll have my assistant sort it out in the morning." But when he tried to call his assistant, the call went straight to a generic voicemail, bypassing her personal line. The low thrum of unease was becoming a roar. The real earthquake struck the next morning. They were having coffee on the terrace when the villa's manager, a stern man named Jean-Pierre, arrived. He was not alone. 2 uniformed security guards stood behind him, their expressions unreadable. "Mr. Hawthorne." Jean-Pierre began his tone, stripped of its usual deference. "There seems to be a significant issue with the payment for this property. We have received no authorization for your stay." Graham stood up, trying to project an authority he no longer felt. "I am Graham Hawthorne. My family owns this villa. There is no issue." "With respect, sir, your family's company, Hawthorne Global, leases this property," Jean-Pierre corrected him. "And we have been contacted directly by your New York head office this morning. Your authorization to use this or any other company asset has been revoked effective immediately." The words hung in the humid air. Bianca stared, her mouth slightly agape. "Revoked by who?" she demanded. Jean-Pierre's gaze was cold. "Our instructions come directly from the CEO, Mr. Aidan Hawthorne." Aidan. The name landed like a bomb, obliterating their paradise. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a direct, calculated attack. "He can't do that!" Graham sputtered his face, turning a blotchy red. "This is a family matter. A disagreement, I'll call him right now, and clear this up." He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking, but Jean-Pierre held up a hand. "That will not be necessary, sir. Our instructions are final. We must ask you and your guest to vacate the premises within the hour. My men will escort you to the gate." The humiliation was absolute. They were being evicted, thrown out. Under the silent, watchful eyes of the security guards, they scrambled to pack their belongings. The beautiful villa now felt like a prison, its luxury mocking their sudden fall. Bianca was a storm of silent fury, slamming drawers and throwing clothes into her suitcase. The dream had shattered, and she was furious at the architect of its failure. An hour later, they were standing on the sun-drenched curb outside the villa's ornate gates, their designer luggage piled around them like a barricade. A local taxi, not a luxury SUV, was called. As they drove away, Graham looked back at the villa, the symbol of the life that had been snatched from him. Their next stop was the legendary Hotel Eden Rock, a bastion of old-world glamour. "We'll get a suite here," Graham insisted, trying to regain some semblance of control. "This is just Aidan being dramatic. He'll cool off." They walked into the lobby, attempting to project an air of casual wealth, but at the check-in desk the nightmare repeated itself, this time in public. The polite professional smiles of the staff curdled into expressions of pity and suspicion as every card Graham presented was declined. A well-dressed couple nearby paused their conversation to stare. The word "declined," whispered from the clerk to her manager, seemed to echo through the opulent lobby. They were pariahs. Defeated and shamed, they retreated. They tried another 5-star hotel, then a boutique one. The answer was always the same. Aidan's financial blockade was absolute. As dusk settled over the island, their options had dwindled to nothing. The taxi driver who had witnessed their entire tour of humiliation took them to a part of the island tourists rarely saw. They ended up in a dingy guest house with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. Their room was small and suffocating, smelling of damp and despair. A single naked bulb cast a sickly yellow light over 2 lumpy beds with stained floral bedspreads. The air conditioner in the window rattled like a dying animal. This was their new reality. Bianca looked around the squalid room, her face a mask of revulsion. This was the antithesis of everything she had ever worked for. "You need to fix this, Graham," she finally shrieked, the dam of her composure breaking. "Call your brother and beg grovel." Do whatever it takes. I am not staying here. Don't you think I've tried? He yelled back, throwing his phone onto the bed. He won't answer. He's cut me off. In a last-ditch effort, he called his own office number, hoping to find a sympathetic ear. He was routed to Human Resources. A cold, unfamiliar voice on the other end of the line read from a script. Mr. Hawthorne, this is to confirm that pursuant to your employment contract, your position has been terminated for conduct detrimental to the company. Your final effects will be couriered to a forwarding address of your choice. Terminated. The final pillar of his identity crumbled. His job, his title, his salary gone. He sank onto the bed, a broken man. Bianca watched him, and any last shred of affection or desire she might have felt for him curdled into pure contempt. She didn't see a lover. She saw a liability. Pathetic! She sneered, her voice dripping with venom. He completely neutered you. You let your big brother treat you like a child. That was the spark. Graham's despair ignited into white-hot rage. This is your fault, he roared, leaping to his feet. None of this would have happened if you had just kept your hands to yourself. If you hadn't attacked Lauren, we wouldn't be in this hellhole. Oh, so it's my fault now. She laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that filled the tiny room. I was just weeding the garden, getting rid of a pest who was in my way. I didn't realize she was the damn queen bee who had the king protecting her. You're the one who was too weak to stand up to either of us. You just stood there useless, like you always are. Their gilded world had not just unraveled. It had been incinerated. Trapped together in a cheap, suffocating room with no money, no power and no escape, all they had left was the toxic ruin of their choices, and it was beginning to choke them both. The email that summoned them back to New York was a masterpiece of cold corporate efficiency. It offered no explanation, no room for negotiation, just a flight confirmation number and a time. The journey was a brutal lesson in their new reality. Gone was the hushed luxury of the Gulf Stream, replaced by the chaotic democratic misery of a commercial flight. They were in coach row 34, middle seats B and C, wedged between a weary mother with a colicky infant and a large man who immediately fell asleep and began to snore. The air was stale thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and cheap coffee. Every cry from the baby seemed to mock Bianca's throbbing headache. She sat rigid, her jaw clenched, her designer sunglasses, a ridiculous affectation in the dim cabin light. This was the world of the common, a world she had spent her entire adult life escaping. Graham sat beside her, a hollowed-out man. He stared at the seat back in front of him for hours, the drone of the engines, a soundtrack to the terrifying reel of his future playing in his mind. The silence between them was no longer tense. It was dead. Their whispered arguments in St. Bart's had exhausted all their energy, leaving only a residue of mutual contempt. They were no longer partners in a glamorous affair, but two criminals being extradited to their sentencing. Touching down at JFK was not a relief, but the start of the next phase of their torment. The Hawthorne Global Tower loomed in the Manhattan skyline, a glittering spear of glass and steel that Graham used to see as his birthright. Now it was a guillotine. As they stepped into the magnificent marble lobby, the chill of the air conditioning was nothing compared to the ice in the atmosphere. Graham felt the shift immediately. The security chief, a man who had clapped him on the back at the company Christmas party, now gave him a curt, professional nod, his eyes impassive. An executive from the finance department, someone Graham had played golf with just weeks ago, saw him, and his face flashed with a brief, awkward pity before he quickly looked away, suddenly fascinated by his phone. Graham was radioactive. His fall from grace was already corporate knowledge. He was no longer Graham Hawthorne, the charming scion. He was a cautionary tale, a ghost already haunting the halls of his former life. A junior assistant, a young woman whose name he didn't know, met them. "Mr. Hawthorne, Ms. Reed, right this way." She didn't smile. Her tone was flat, her demeanor that of a functionary leading the condemned to the gallows. The elevator ride to the 80th floor was excruciatingly long and silent. The soft chime at each passing floor was like the ticking of a clock, counting down the final seconds of his old life. The boardroom doors opened into a vast, intimidating space. The room was designed to convey power with a single colossal table of polished obsidian that reflected the sky like a dark lake. The floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a breathtaking, godlike view of the city, a sprawling kingdom of mortals below. And there, standing before the window like a general, surveying his domain, was Aidan. He was a silhouette against the bright morning light, his back to them. He didn't turn when they entered, forcing them to walk the long length of the room and stand awkwardly before the table. The assistant quietly closed the doors behind them, the soft click sealing them in. Aidan let the silence stretch a tactic he used in negotiations to unnerve his opponents. He made them wait, making them feel small and insignificant against the backdrop of his power. Finally he turned, and the full force of his presence hit them. His face was an emotionless mask, his eyes as cold and grey as a winter storm. His gaze swept over Graham with a flicker of something akin to disgust, before landing on Bianca with such chilling dismissal that she involuntarily took a half-step back. "Graham, Miss Reed," Aidan said. His voice wasn't loud, but it filled the cavernous room, each word precise and sharp. "Thank you for coming." Graham's desperation finally broke through his fear. "Aidan, listen, this is all just a massive overreaction." He stammered, his voice sounding thin and weak. "What happened on the plane was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I was going to fix it, I swear." Aidan held up a single elegant hand, and Graham's pathetic justifications died in his throat. "Mistakes." Aidan began, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "When you spill coffee on a report, Graham, mistakes are forgetting to return a phone call. What you did was a conscious abdication of your duties as a husband, a father-to-be, and a man. You bore witness to an act of brutish violence against your pregnant wife, and you chose in that moment to do nothing. There is no fixing that." He gestured to two chairs isolated in front of the massive table. "Sit." It was not a request. They sat feeling like prisoners in an interrogation. Aidan remained standing, pacing slowly before the window, a caged tiger who owned the cage. "Let's be clear about what is going to happen, so there are no further misunderstandings," he began, starting with his brother. "First, your position at this company. It is terminated. You weren't a vice president, Graham. You were a passenger. You held a title you never earned and collected a salary for work you never did. That free ride is over." "Aidan, please." Graham begged, his face ashen. Aidan ignored him. "Second, the money. As you've discovered, your access to all family funds, trusts, and corporate accounts has been permanently severed. The life you have been living, the cars, the clothes, the trips, was funded by me, by my work. That support has now ended. The penthouse where you and Lauren lived is being professionally cleansed and redecorated. It will be a home for my nephew and his mother. You are never to set foot in it again." He paused, letting the weight of homelessness and poverty sink in. Finally, he delivered the killing blow. "I have instructed our attorneys to begin the process of formally disinheriting you. You will receive a one-time severance from the family trust. It will be a modest amount, enough for a deposit on a small apartment and a few months' rent, A chance to start a new life, a life you build yourself. After that, you are on your own. His gaze then shifted, pinning Bianca to her chair. Now, Ms. Reed, I've read your file. It's quite the work of fiction. Independent consultant is a very generous term for what you do. He picked up a remote from the table. The screen behind him, previously showing the Hawthorne Global logo, flickered to life. It showed a photo of Bianca, draped over a much older European tycoon on a yacht in Monaco. The date stamp in the corner was from 6 months ago. You have a talent for finding wealthy, insecure men and bleeding them dry. Aidan continued, his voice dripping with contempt. He clicked the remote again. A new picture, Bianca in Dubai, with another man. Click again. Aspen. Click. London. This folder, he said, nodding towards a thick binder on the table, contains financial records, sworn statements, and a very detailed history of your associates, enough to interest the IRS and perhaps even Interpol. Bianca's face was a mask of terror. You can't prove anything, she whispered the words devoid of conviction. Oh, I can, Aidan said with a faint, chilling smile. But the beauty is I won't have to. You see, an official complaint has been filed with the Federal Aviation Administration regarding the assault that took place in federal airspace. The report includes statements from the crew and video from the cabin surveillance system. Interfering with a flight crew and assaulting a passenger are serious federal offenses. I believe their investigators will be contacting you shortly. I imagine you'll find it difficult to continue your globe-trotting lifestyle when your name is on the no-fly list. Not to mention the legal fees and the potential for a criminal record. Bianca looked like she couldn't breathe. He hadn't just taken away her current meal ticket. He had destroyed her entire hunting ground. This is your one and only offer, Aidan stated. There is a non-disclosure agreement on the table. You will sign it, promising to never contact, approach, or mention any member of the Hawthorne family in any medium ever again. You will walk out of this building, and you will disappear. In return, the more creative evidence in that folder will remain private. If you refuse, or if I ever hear your name again, I will burn your entire world to the ground. Am I clear? Paralyzed by fear, Bianca could only manage a jerky nod. Finally, Aidan turned back to his brother. The corporate mask fell away, and for a fleeting moment, Graham saw the face of the older brother he once knew. But it was etched with a deep, sorrowful disappointment that was far worse than rage. You had everything, Graham, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. A life most people can only dream of. A wife who adored you, who was bringing your child into the world. And you threw it all away for this. He gestured vaguely toward Bianca, as if she were a piece of garbage. I'm not doing this just to punish you. I'm doing this to protect them. To build a wall around Lauren and my nephew, that your weakness, your selfishness, and your poison can never penetrate. He walked to the door and opened it. My assistant will witness your signatures on the NDA and show you out. The severance check will be mailed. Goodbye, Graham. The name hung in the air, no longer a term of brotherhood, but a final clinical severance. Aidan left without a backward glance, the heavy door closing with a soft, definitive click. They were alone. Graham looked at Bianca, the architect of his ruin, and saw a terrified stranger. She looked at him and saw a worthless, disinherited fool. There were no more lies, no more seductions, only the cold, ugly truth in the silent, imposing boardroom. They had reached their destination, and it was rock bottom. In the end, the justice that found Graham and Bianca wasn't loud or explosive. It was a quiet, systematic erasure. Graham stripped of his name, and Fortune drifted into obscurity, a ghost haunted by the life he so carelessly discarded. Bianca entangled in a federal investigation and blacklisted from the social circles she preyed upon, vanished from the high life, her name becoming a cautionary tale whispered in exclusive clubs. Their fall was as swift and brutal as their arrogance had been. Meanwhile, Lauren, surrounded by the unwavering support of Aidan, blossomed. She gave birth to a beautiful baby boy, whom she named Leo. In the safety and genuine love of her new life, she rediscovered her strength, not as a hawthorn by marriage, but as a mother and a survivor. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about the wealth you have, but the character you show, and that loyalty is a currency worth more than any fortune. Karma delivered by a protective brother ensured that those who caused her pain would never get to enjoy the spoils of their cruelty. If you were moved by this story of ultimate karma and the unbreakable bond of family, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that justice will always find a way. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories where the deserving get their reward and the wicked get exactly what they have coming. Thank you for listening.